Sorry. So let's get started. Okay, so let's talk first about the Byrne State Crisis Intervention Program. One thing I want to point out quickly is the reference here to Edward Byrne in this federal grant program. This funding came out of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act that Congress passed in 2022 in the summer on the heels of the tragic school shooting in Uvalde, Texas. And there are similarities in structure of Byrne SCIP to the Justice Assistance Grant Program. The formula to determine how much states get for Byrne SCIP is based on the prior fiscal year formula allocation for JAG, for example. Some of the way that the funding is structured in different pots of money is similar, and now there's a purpose area that overlaps between the two grant programs, but they are distinct grant programs with their own set of eligibility requirements, different pots of funding, different appropriations, different time frames, and different requirements or special conditions specific to the grant program. So I just want to make sure that it's clear that even though there's some similarities, they are distinct grant programs at the federal level. Okay, so the Byrne State Crisis Intervention Program is really focused on gun violence. That's really at the core of this grant program, and programs and initiatives that we can fund with the program to target risk factors that are likely to lead to gun violence. So that's really, that was really the intention or the spirit of creating this new grant program by Congress. So I think that's really important to keep in mind as we go through this information, but also if you're intending to submit an application for funding. The purpose of Byrne SCIP is to provide funding for creating or implementing state crisis intervention court proceedings that can include extreme risk protection order programs and related gun violence reduction programs or initiatives. There is a little bit more information, a little more specific information about eligible activities on the next slide. These goals for the state of Colorado, and this gets at another similarity between JAG and Byrne SCIP. These were developed by the JAG board, which was also tasked with overseeing and making decisions about guiding, programming and the budget for the Byrne SCIP grant program. And so we developed a program and budget plan with the members of the board, and part of that was developing what we wanted the goals for Colorado to be. And what we came up with essentially was increasing understanding and utilization of extreme risk protection orders in the state. You may be familiar with the fact that who can petition for extreme risk protection orders in Colorado was expanded in the 2023 legislative session. And so there's a need to do some education and messaging and training around all of the people who are able to petition the court for an extreme risk protection order. Our focus through this grant program is going to be on professional petitioners, so law enforcement, medical professionals, behavioral health professionals, district attorneys, etc. The board is also seeking to use SCIP funds through the subawards that will be given out to help mitigate gun violence in the most impacted communities in our state. There will be funding that goes out as an opportunity for community-based or nonprofit organizations to have resources to address gun violence in our state. That's going to go out through one of the statewide agencies that is receiving some of the state set-aside Byrne SCIP funds that we received. But then also trying to increase the capacity of specialized court programs, law enforcement agencies, crisis intervention programs, behavioral health, deflection, treatment services, and various gun safety programs or initiatives. And then also seeking to decrease intentional and negligent gun violence injuries and fatalities in Colorado. And the date here of September 30th, 2026 is when our initial Byrne SCIP award that the Colorado Division of Criminal Justice received from the Department of Justice ends. So that is the end date of the first award. And then as we move forward, of course, the board's going to also want to keep track of how we're doing on these goals, and things may be extended or adjusted as we move forward. The point I want to make about the initial award that DCJ received is that it is for 2 fiscal years of funding, fiscal year 2022 and fiscal year 2023 of congressional appropriations. And so that's an important piece of information to share because the amount of funding that we have available to award to local government agencies during this application cycle is likely going to be higher than we will have in future application cycles. So just keep that in mind. Agencies who are units of local government are eligible for this pass-through funding. That could be a city, county, township, town, certain federally recognized Indian tribes. That could translate, at a local level to courts, law enforcement, public health departments, behavioral health, DA's offices, public defender's offices, probation, emergency communications, emergency responders, etc. So the key here is that it has to be a local government agency. Community-based or nonprofit organizations are not eligible to apply for this pot of pass-through Byrne SCIP funding. In terms of eligible activities, the sort of high-level activities that Byrne SCIP funds can be used for includes implementation of state crisis intervention court proceedings, including IRPO programs, specialty court programs such as drug, mental health, veterans treatment courts, courts that address gun violence, and any of these that also specifically accept clients with firearm violations. Behavioral health deflection is also an eligible activity for individuals at risk to themselves or others. And then also funding for law enforcement agencies or others, really, to safely secure, store, track, and return relinquished firearms. If folks are considering applying for funding for a drug court program, just be aware that any, because this funding is from the Bureau of Justice Assistance at the Department of Justice that came to us, be aware that any drug court program has to have allow access to medication-assisted treatment where that's clinically indicated for that client. And no eligible client can be denied access to the drug court program when funded with Byrne SCIP dollars because of their use of FDA-approved medications for treatment of substance use disorders, et cetera. So the MAT must be permitted to be continued and can't deny access to medication-assisted treatment when it's clinically indicated, et cetera. So just be aware of these caveats, essentially, to seeking funds through this grant program for a drug court. Additionally, there are requirements around operating a drug court program by following the 10 key components for drug courts that are in these two different publications, either through, well, really ideally through the National Association of Drug Court Professionals. But I think that publication was funded by BJA. And then there could be requirements to enter into a corrective action plan if there isn't compliance with that requirement. So keep that in mind as well, that if you're going to request funding for a drug court, there are various conditions attached to that. And then if you're considering asking for funds for a behavioral health crisis care program, there are also some conditions around doing so in accordance with SAMHSA guidelines for behavioral health crisis care. And I've got a link here in this slide to those guidelines. This resource and the resources in regard to using Byrne SCIP funds for drug courts, they're included along with other resources that you might find helpful for developing a project plan for an application in a resource list that is in the Library and Zoom Grants, which is the online application system that DCJ uses for funding opportunities. So you can find all of that information there in that resource list. One of the last things I want to mention is that there is a limitation on your request for administrative costs using Byrne SCIP funds. So you are limited to 10% of your overall request for direct costs or costs for your program or project. You can only request up to 10% of that total for administrative costs. In addition to that, you can also ask for indirect costs, funding for indirect costs to be covered. So those two aren't, mutually exclusive. You could ask for both of those. The 10% limitation on direct costs doesn't affect indirect at whatever negotiated rate you may have with the federal cognizant agency that you go through, or the 10% de minimis rate. All right. So does anybody have any questions right now before we move into an overview of the JAG grant program? Feel free to unmute yourself or ask a question in the chat if that works better for you. Okay. We will move along then. I'm going to hand it over to Michelle here to talk to you a bit about the JAG grant program.
Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Michelle Lovejoy, and I am the program grant manager for the Justice Assistance Grant Program. So that's what JAG stands for. JAG funds are federal, and they're kind of broad. They allow states and local governments to support a broad range of activities that prevent and control crime and to improve the criminal justice system. Eligible activities. Kind of feel like I put this backwards, but anyway, the funds can be used for TA, training, personnel, equipment, all kinds of activities. All the activities, of course, have to fit under one of the 9 purpose areas. And in the announcement on the webpage, it will also list all the descriptions of all the 9 purpose areas. Amy alluded to something where we're tying the 2 grant programs together, which is Purpose Area 9, which is new. And it's almost exactly what SCIP funds do, except for, I think the main difference is the gun violence activities. So in order to keep it clean, we would like you to, if you're interested in applying for in a purpose area number 9, instead of applying in JAG, we would love for you to apply in SCIP instead. I think that's it on that. I'm going to be short and sweet. I'm almost done. Okay, so the eligible agencies are units of local government. That's municipal, county, state, special districts, Native American tribes. Special district would be like I think we got a grant, an application from a housing authority. So as long as you're some type of governmental agency, you can apply, and if it's within the focus of our grant funding. So as Amy also talked about was the JAG Board. The JAG Board also came up with their funding priorities for JAG. And this year, they've chosen community-based violence intervention and behavioral programs, health programs that prevent and reduce criminality related to substance abuse and mental health mental health disorders. Also, motor vehicle theft activities, and one of the other preferences is that the applications will be given applications that demonstrate collaboration with underserved communities will be given preference. I wanted to talk about real quick a couple things related to applications where you're requesting equipment and software. So that would be like maybe body-worn cameras. The board will pay for the equipment and 1 year of the subscription cost. And then as far as warranties go, warranties are limited to 1 year, and if it's more than 1 year, it has to be included in a bundle.
If you're talking to us, you're muted.
Oh, wow, sorry. Did you all, sorry about that. We had a technical difficulty. The meeting dropped on us and we had to restart the Zoom meeting. Sorry about that. That's never happened before.
I'm not sure how much hopefully you heard all of my part and do you have any questions?
Allie has a question.
It dropped right when you were talking about the grant paying for body-worn cameras and 1 year of software. That's when it dropped.
Okay.
Okay, so I think the only thing I left that I said was the warranties are limited to 1 year unless they're in a bundle of like 5 years or something like that, and you pay for it all at one time during the year. And the last thing is that you have to include quotes with your applications.
All right. So that was the last piece. And then Allie, go
Hi
ahead.
there. I am with Youth Zone. We've got a couple other representatives here. We're a nonprofit, and we're wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the type of relationships that we would have to have with some of the government agencies in order to apply for funding for the programming that we do.
Within SCIP or within JAG?
Within JAG, thank you.
Okay. So what we're looking for is that the collaborative relationship where maybe you guys have had some meetings and you've decided that you want to do this programming and that maybe you've got the people on your board, or you've got just that your proof that you guys are working together to come up with a project, and it's for the community altogether, as opposed to the other thing is that, so say it's Youth Zone and then you have a contractor, and that the contractor isn't running everything, it's actually you guys working collaboratively.
Okay. And do the government organizations typically just pass the money through to us, or is it a reimbursement? How does that work?
Oh, I see what you're doing. Okay. I was thinking Youth Zone. Okay. So you would probably go through Youth Zones in the 9th. Is that correct?
Correct. So perhaps with the district attorney's office here.
Yeah, and the district attorney's office is doing some kind of program, and they're going to contract with you. So the money would go to the I forgot what we said, the DA's office. Is that what you said? And then they
Yes,
would
ma'am.
pass it on to you.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Jean? I'm not sure who's first.
I think it was you, Jane, that had your hand up first. Go ahead, please.
Hi. So my name's Jean Borrego. I'm working with Rio Grande County Sheriff's Office. I have two questions. One is about the SCIP and one is about JAG. And it's more, the JAG question is more generated towards the BWC or body worn camera piece. So let's start with SCIP, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I understand the focus for gun violence for SCIP.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure, although we may benefit from some of the funding opportunities within that grant, I'm not sure as a small rural law enforcement department, if we would meet that gun violence threshold. We have had officer involved shootings, and we're seeing an increase in some gun related offenses. But I think sometimes when you see that focus on gun violence, I don't know what that looks like, because we're not going to look like Colorado Springs or Denver or any of those more population center areas. And so I wanted to know what your thoughts are as to the feasibility and practicability of being able to apply for those SCIP funds.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that, one of the areas of really big emphasis in this grant program, Jean, is that crisis intervention piece. And yes, we can do, assessments of people. Ultimately, do we know whether or not somebody is going to get to a place when they're in crisis that they're going to commit gun violence or not? We don't know that, right? So I think a lot of work can also be done around trying to address risks for that through crisis intervention type of work. And so that, I would say, keep that in mind, because really that, that's a significant part of what this funding is for, is addressing crises and the risks of gun violence before they occur. Obviously, there's a different prevalence and incidence of gun violence depending on the community. And I think that the intention of this grant program was really to be statewide. So earlier when I talked about the similar structure between the Byrne State Crisis Intervention Program and the Justice Assistance Grant Program, one of the same things between the two is funding for what they call less than $10,000 jurisdictions. So the formula is based on violent crime rates and population. And so you may have a jurisdiction that doesn't meet the threshold to be able to apply directly for justice assistance grant funding, for example, at the federal level. And so those same less than 10,000 jurisdictions are included as part of the structure of Byrne SCIP. And so there are a number of smaller jurisdictions with, not geographically necessarily, but in terms of population and incidents of violent crime, that there is money in this, $1.8+ million that's available set aside for those smaller jurisdictions, the less than $10,000 jurisdictions. So the board is required actually to give it's I can't remember quite the number off the top of my head, but it's more than $200,000 worth of the 1.8 million that's available. The board's going to have to give that out to those types of jurisdictions that meet that definition. So I also think there's a real opportunity here for you to be able to secure some of that funding. Obviously, I can't guarantee that. We don't make the decisions, the board makes the decision. And then from there, we with this grant program, we are actually also required to send the applications that the board approves on to the Bureau of Justice Assistance for review and approval before we can issue the awards. So there's an extra step here. But there's funding that's prioritized for smaller communities.
Okay. I find all of that very helpful. Because we've got some folks that were thinking we just wouldn't qualify and we would just get drowned out, and that there was no point in pursuing any of these SCIP funds. That's not exactly what I'm hearing. I understand that you don't have guarantees, of course. We see that with all grants. is there any way you could kind of capture your verbal answer to that question and send it in an email to me?
Absolutely. And Jean, remind me the jurisdiction that you're with again?
Rio Grande County Sheriff's Office.
Okay.
Oh, I have a grant with them.
Okay, because I will also specifically look in the meantime to see if you're on the less than 10,000 jurisdiction list.
That would be exceptional. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I will follow up with you. And the other thing to keep in mind is, you know, we have more funding available this year, like I said, than I think we'll have in future fiscal year awards that we get for this grant program. And in addition, it's so new that, you know, we're having to work really hard to get applications in the door. So, you know, there's not a lot of applications submitted or in process yet either. And I think that increases anybody's odds of getting funded as well.
Okay. All right. Our sheriff's office and our public health partners, along with victims advocates, and the DA's office, I know they've been working on some safer streets projects and some stuff that way. I think we do have the collaboration, and one of the benefits actually of being in a smaller community is everybody knows everybody, and I think that collaboration and some of that organizational structure that would support what I think would be some really good SCIP supported efforts might be actually more doable for us than what maybe we anticipated.
Sure.
So it's good to hear.
Yeah, I encourage you to apply. And, you know, you can either do so as a collaborative project, or if others in your community are interested in submitting an application as well, so that you each have, you know, a project for your part of a collaborative effort, that would be great. And I should say, we haven't said this yet, maybe somebody has a question about this, but if you apply, you can apply for either of these grant programs, is what I'm trying to say. So you're not like, if you apply from one, you're not prohibited from applying for the other.
Okay.
Multiple applications.
Thank you so much. And then I just want to address my JAG question to Michelle. So you mentioned as an example for the BWC, the body worn camera equipment, about those warranties
Yes,
and subscriptions.
yes.
So what does that look like? Let's say you have a type of equipment that's like that. And in order to make it more economical, you end up doing like a 5-year lease. Is that still considered a packaged deal?
These are- aren't they great? They make it so hard. So you're never buying the equipment is what the point you're making, right?
Yeah, there are some vendors that offer the options where you don't actually purchase the equipment, that it's leased, and or you'll see vendors where you might get the cameras, but then you have a subscription.
Okay, so I would say 1 year, because I think that's what the board's decision was, that they would do 1 year on the subscription.
Okay, and so so that would be the same whether the equipment's purchased outright or if it's done in a lease, and say the lease has a 5-year term?
Yeah, let me explain why though. So
Sure.
on in the federal funds, the money cannot be used for a project past theirs.
Outside the period of performance.
Right.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Okay.
Okay, that makes sense. So if you apply for I don't know, tasers or tough books or body worn cameras or something 1 year and you don't get the total amount of what you need in order to cover your department, if you want to do another JAG grant, is that like a second year grant and you take your first year grant and resubmit that, or do you need an entirely new project for each application year, even if it's for the same equipment through JAG?
Okay, so you're saying, say we buy X and they have a 5-year warranty or whatever, right? Or 5-year subscription. So you're the first year you said you're going to apply for the equipment and 1 year of subscription, and then you're saying for the second year you would do, is that what you're asking me? That kind of scenario? And
Not exactly, but I want to hear the answer to your question.
I'm trying to figure out what your question is so I can answer it correctly. So in that instance, you could come in for the second year, but they're going to know you did the first year. So I'm not sure, since their rule is we're only going to cover 1 year, I would think that they would not do that.
Okay, so let me provide a little bit of clarification.
Okay, please.
So let's say we apply for tough books
Okay.
for the JAG, and we're gonna say we ask for $30,000.
All right.
And JAG says for this year we will award you 15.
Okay.
Okay, so let's say for that time period until we're able to reapply for JAG funds, they're able to limp stuff along, but they want to apply for the other $15,000 worth to make up to that $30,000. The agency wants to try again for another JAG grant for the same type of equipment that they just didn't get the full amount for in the previous year.
All right.
And, yeah, what does that look like in Zoom grants? Do you
What you would
resubmit the same project again and modify those numbers in the budget? Or do you have to build out an entirely new project?
So you would do a continuation application for that particular project. So the next year you would ask for 15, and it would be like year 2 of that same grant. Does that make sense?
That's extremely helpful. Thank you.
Jennifer.
Great, thank you. Just a quick clarification question regarding submitting quotes. If we were looking at a type of software, would we need to include a quote for the software with the application?
What kind of software are we talking?
It's cell phone detection software, intelligence-based software.
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions?
See, we've got.
Okay. On the youth zone. Okay, I guess that's it. Any other questions? Oh, did I tell? I think it's Jean. Jean, will you put your email address in the chat? Because that's the one that that you needed more information.
And then so I can follow up with you.
Yeah, I'll do that right now.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Great. So you might real quickly before we wrap this up, a couple of things. So just want to also make sure that you all know that neither grant program requires matching funds. So you don't have to come up with, a portion of project funds to match the request for grant funds. And then you might have seen that we've extended the application deadline for Byrne SCIP. So just want to make sure everybody's clear that the deadline is now Friday, March 8th for applications.
The JAG still remains the same, so it's, the applications are due February 27th, which is a Tuesday.
Yeah. And otherwise, just feel free to contact us anytime. If a question comes up as you're working on the application, or based on the information that we shared with you today, we're available to answer questions throughout the process, not just during this session today. So, and Jean, we got your email address in the chat. Thank you for that. And we just want to say thank you all for joining us today. We hope that it was helpful, and we look forward to receiving your applications for Byrne SCIP and JAG grant funding, and hopefully to working with you all on some really great projects out there around our state.
And thank you for taking the time. We appreciate it.
Yes, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Take care.
Bye.